at Redstone Joint Forces Training Base. Most mornings started with the same drill routines, the same shouting from instructors, and the same quiet figure moving past the motor pool toward the boiler room. Ellie Graves showed up every day at 0500 sharp. She wore a faded pair of coveralls, with her name stitched loosely over the chest pocket, boots that had seen better decades, and a canvas bag slung over one shoulder filled with pipe couplers, wiring tools, and a rusted crescent wrench she never seemed to replace. Recruits barely noticed her at first, then couldn't seem to stop commenting once they did. Someone always had something to say when she passed. She's probably here on some base diversity program. Bet she couldn't tell a socket wrench from a spark plug. The words were rarely shouted, just murmured loud enough to be heard. She never reacted, never glanced their way. She just bent to her work, adjusting pressure valves, tracing utility lines, disappearing into access tunnels without so much as a sigh. No one really knew where she came from. Her clearance was civilian grade, and her ID badge marked her as contracted support through facilities and engineering. She didn't join them for lunch. She never took breaks near the benches by the armory. Once, a sergeant joked that Ellie probably slept in the supply closet with the janitorial carts. Another time, she was fixing a leak under the main comms conduit, and a group of enlisted soldiers tossed their snack wrappers near her boots as they walked by. She didn't say a word, just folded the tape, reset the pipe bracket, and moved on. The worst came one Friday during rotorcraft extraction training. A full flight crew had just completed fast rope deployment drills on the tarmac. Ellie was walking a service route that cut across the edge of the landing zone, focused on a broken irrigation manifold behind a barrier fence. She stepped clear into restricted airspace without realizing it. The incoming UH-60 Blackhawk flared into final approach, and one of the flight instructors barked into a megaphone so loud it echoed across the entire field. "Civilian, you are in a hot zone. Move now." Ellie flinched, just slightly. Her shoulders hunched low. Without lifting her head, she turned and stepped backward, keeping her profile small. She didn't argue, didn't explain. The blades above stirred up sand in a storm around her, but she didn't run. By the time the crew chief slammed the cargo door shut, she was already halfway back to the pump station. Later, someone said she should be banned from the flight line. Another joked about putting up signs that said, "Stay in your lane." Lady, the base was full of alpha energy, and Ellie didn't fit anywhere in it. Still, every morning, the boilers came on at the right time. Every afternoon, the old generator next to the mess hall stopped leaking fuel. On Sundays, she rewrapped exposed cable housing near the comms tower, even though it wasn't on her work order. She was, for the most part, invisible, but never absent. Something about the way she moved, the way her eyes flicked across a pressure gauge or paused just slightly at the sound of certain radio clicks, didn't sit quite right with those who were paying attention. Only a few did. Most never looked past the oil stains on her sleeves. The backup generator yard behind Redstone's motor pool wasn't marked as high priority, but Ellie spent more time there than most. The metal housings bled heat even in early spring, and the scent of diesel hung in the air long after the engines shut down. She knelt beside the number 3 unit just past 0900 working alone as usual. Her canvas tool bag was open on the ground. She pulled a socket wrench from the side pouch and leaned into the panel. That's when it happened. A gust of wind tugged her sleeve up, exposing the skin at the back of her shoulder. The ink was visible for just a moment. It wasn't flashy. No bright colors. No tribal patterns. Just silver-black lines faded slightly with time. The kind of tattoo done for purpose, not style. A folded wing eagle clutched a circular optic reticle in its talons. 5 hash marks framed the lower arc. The symbol didn't mean anything to most people, but to Chief Petty Officer Marshall, who happened to be crossing the yard on his way to a maintenance coordination brief, it meant everything. He stopped mid-step, head tilted slightly. The symbol wasn't standard, It wasn't listed in any current unit designations, but Marshall had seen it once before, during a closed-door sit-rep at Camp Moorhead 6 years ago. The emblem belonged to Spectre 5, a long-range recon sniper unit embedded under JSOC authority. The unit had operated in blackout conditions during a series of joint raids across southern Afghanistan. Then one day, they vanished. The official story marked them KIA during Operation Hollow Watch. No recovery, no names released. A full redaction followed. Even their call signs were wiped from comms archives. Only whispers remained. Spectre 5 was used as a warning in Tier 1 briefings when things go black. They stay black. Marshall didn't speak. Ellie hadn't noticed him. She remained focused on a misaligned grounding bracket, tightening the bolt with steady pressure. He took a step back. His mind ran hot with reasons why that tattoo could exist here. Now, on a civilian technician. None of them made sense. He left the yard without finishing his walk. By 10:30, 2 other SEAL instructors had been quietly briefed. None approached Ellie, but one of them spent 20 minutes reviewing archived rosters on a secure terminal in the operations trailer. No match, no service history, no mention of a prior enlistment under Graves. Her contractor file showed nothing irregular. Standard civilian background. Clean. At 13:20, Marshall pulled footage from a week earlier. It showed Ellie adjusting a damaged water valve outside the perimeter fence. Nothing strange at first glance. But her posture, the way she scanned the tree line behind the worksite, didn't look like someone watching for coyotes or checking weather. It looked like someone trained to measure distances and threat angles. The story spread quietly. A corporal from Signals swore she'd seen the same emblem on a classified briefing deck back in Germany. A staff sergeant from Security Ops stopped talking altogether when asked. And in the armory, someone printed a blurry photo from the overhead camera, zoomed in on Ellie's shoulder, and taped it inside a locker door. In black marker, a message was scrawled underneath. She's not one of us. She's older. But they were wrong. She wasn't older. She was earlier. She'd walked the ground they were training for, and she had never stopped watching. By sunset, nobody had spoken to her directly. Ellie had gone back to the utility corridor behind the motor pool. She hadn't said a word to anyone, but something had shifted. A layer of silence thicker than usual hung around her now. Not from dismissal, from caution. The kind of caution soldiers show when they're no longer sure who's standing beside them, or what she might already know. It wasn't one moment that set things in motion. It was a string of them, small, almost forgettable details, picked up by different people at different times. A delay in how Ellie responded to sudden changes, the way she didn't flinch when everyone else did. The way she moved, like a person who already knew what came next. The base conducted a full readiness drill at 07:42 on a Thursday. The alarms kicked in without warning. Every speaker along the interior perimeter blasted a DEFCON 3 alert. Warning lights stuttered through the corridors. Trainees dropped into crouch positions. Staff secured doors and waited for command instructions. Ellie was in the lower east corridor, fixing an auxiliary breaker on the backup HVAC system. The moment the sirens hit, she didn't even pause. Specialist Mendez, a comms tech walking past with a checklist, stopped when he saw her. She wasn't startled. Her hands didn't shake. She stayed bent over the open panel, adjusting a copper terminal with the same slow precision as if nothing had changed. After a beat, she reached to test a load circuit, her eyes flicking once to the red emergency light above the door, then back to her work. Mendez didn't say anything in the moment, but it stayed with him. Later that day, he mentioned it during chow. A corporal from the radar team overheard. She said Ellie had done the same thing 2 weeks earlier during a localized power loss drill. Never looked up. Never checked the alert status. As if she'd already confirmed it herself. By Saturday, 2 junior analysts from intelligence support had pulled access logs and internal camera feeds. They weren't looking for anything official, just curious. What they found wasn't dramatic. but it made their skin crawl. Ellie showed up near almost every location that later reported minor faults or maintenance gaps. Not just once or twice, over and over. In places she wasn't technically scheduled to be, a duct run above the main server room, a crawl space behind the comms junction hub, the access panel beneath the fuel relay for the base generators. The overlap wasn't direct. It was always just before something happened. An hour here, a morning there. Enough to dismiss individually. But lined up in sequence, it looked more like a pattern. Ruiz, the lead analyst, mapped it across a 3-week timeline. The result was hard to ignore. Ellie had been within 20 meters of every significant system anomaly since the start of the month. What really unsettled them wasn't her proximity. It was her calm. Review of archived footage showed that whenever something failed, glitched, or tripped a sensor, Ellie never reacted the way others did. When alarms rang, she didn't look around. When lights flickered, her hands didn't pause. When protocols locked down, she didn't change pace. She simply adjusted, moved, kept working. Sergeant Boyle brought up something else. 2 weeks earlier, he'd seen her in the west tunnel at 0317 during a shift change. She'd been walking the secondary pipe corridor alone. No flashlight, no tools in hand, just walking. When he asked what she was doing, she didn't answer. She didn't stop. Just nodded once and kept moving. It was subtle, the way people started keeping a wider berth around her. Not because of fear, not even mistrust. It was something older than that. Respect, maybe, or instinct. The kind that told you someone wasn't quite who they claimed to be, and you weren't supposed to ask why. By the end of the week, someone had disabled the name label on her locker, not removed it, just unscrewed the tag and laid it face down on the shelf inside. That night, the base went quiet early. People said less, watched more, because something was off about Ellie Graves. And deep down, no one really wanted to be the first to find out what. The training simulation began at 15:00 sharp. Redstone's western sector had been designated for a full-spectrum drone defense exercise using MQ-11B mock drones and localized jamming elements. The exercise included live response from multiple divisions, simulating a hostile multi-vector infiltration. Inside tactical control. Operators monitored movement paths, radio behavior, and radar response curves in real time. Everything followed protocol until it didn't. At 15:07, one of the secondary terminals tracking airspace drift flickered. Then again, operators flagged it, assuming minor voltage interference. But within 60 seconds, the AN-MPQ-64 Sentinel radar array covering the western corridor dropped offline. Not a delay. A hard cutoff. It was followed immediately by cascading signal losses across several encrypted channels. Ground-to-command telemetry stuttered. By 15:09, 3 sections of internal comms were unreadable. Captain Renner, overseeing the drill from Tactical 1, issued a halt command and called for system isolation. At first, they assumed it was a simulation variable, an advanced inject. But when engineering confirmed no one had input the failure code, things shifted. Orders were given to pause all movement drills. Surveillance techs scrambled to confirm it wasn't a multi-phase training script. No confirmation came. Operators began rebooting backup feeds. Still nothing. At 15:11, a single voice cut across the secure comms band. It didn't ask for clearance. It didn't identify base station origin. The voice was female, calm, clear, Spectre 6. Visual confirmation of unauthorized beacon. Thermal source fixed at grid 3C west. Requesting permission to engage. The frequency she used was not part of the simulation network. It was a Tier 1 classified band. Captain Renner, now pacing at the edge of the tactical map table, keyed his mic. Spectre 6. Identify and authenticate. Who authorized this net? The response came without hesitation. Spectre 6. Mission override in effect. Beacon verified. Executing now. Before anyone could reply, the external perimeter surveillance unit flagged a real-time thermal spike. At 1512, a clean detonation lit up the western tree line, just inside the comms buffer zone. It was not simulation ordnance. It was a live payload. Immediate dispatch teams mobilized from Response 2. They arrived within 3 minutes. Smoke was minimal. Contained. The source was a field sensor array. An unauthorized surveillance beacon embedded into a reinforced casing. Its thermal signature had been mapped to mimic routine maintenance signals. The device had been wired for remote relay to an off-base node. Its shielding had bypassed the radar filter for weeks, until it hadn't. The beacon was destroyed. Fragments were scattered across a 15-meter radius. But that wasn't what stopped the team in their tracks. A single shell casing rested at the base of a felled support post. Clean. Still warm. 8.6-meter Lapua Magnum. Match grade. That round had only one known use in U.S. inventory, the Spectre program's precision kit. The same round that disappeared when the unit was disbanded. The casing bore micro-stamping that matched Spectre Phi's final deployment batch. No sniper had been authorized in the sector. No training element carried that caliber on base. No firing report had triggered during the explosion. The shot had come from somewhere further out, suppressed, silent, and pinpoint accurate. Whoever took it had known exactly where to aim, and when. Inside the command center, there was no conversation. Captain Renner reviewed the comms recording 4 times. The voice never wavered. It had come through a triple encrypted net not in use since Spectre Phi's last documented mission. The override was accepted by the system. That shouldn't have been possible, but it had happened. By 1530, every division lead was on secure channel lockdown. A classified flag was raised through joint ops. Base-level personnel were told the simulation had experienced a software failure. No mention was made of the detonation. Meanwhile, back near the mechanical bay, Ellie Graves had been repairing a ventilation damper in the secondary intake chamber. She wiped her hands on a rag, signed off a checklist, and returned her torque wrench to the tray. No one saw her carrying a radio. No one heard her speak. But later that evening, a young airman walking the fence line claimed he'd seen a small figure near the crest of the southern hill at sunset. Just a silhouette. Still, watching the tree line like she was waiting for something that might never come again. Colonel Clayton Ramsey had not expected to see that symbol again. Not outside of black folders and closed-door debriefs, and certainly not on the shoulder of a woman logging HVAC hours on a base maintenance schedule. But after the incident near the western perimeter, after the unlogged detonation and the voice on the encrypted frequency, the reports started coming to him. Quietly. From people who knew how to speak without leaving a paper trail. He reviewed the incident report first, then the sensor debris photos, then the casing. It wasn't the type of mistake anyone could make. The 8.6-meter Lapua Magnum round was only ever issued in theater, and only to one program Spectre. He'd authorized the procurement himself back when he still held a clearance level that kept him awake at night. And while most of the world had forgotten about Spectre Phi, he couldn't. At Aero 740 the next morning, Ramsey left his office without an aide or driver and walked the quarter-mile to the far end of the base. He didn't call ahead. He didn't log the movement. He found her at the rear of the maintenance bay, crouched over a rust-stained valve, casing with a pressure gauge in one hand. She didn't look up when he entered. The overhead lights buzzed softly. It smelled of copper, acetone, and dust. He took 3 steps inside, stopping when he reached the edge of her workbench. She straightened slowly, her sleeve pushed up from the motion. That's when he saw it. The symbol was exactly as he remembered. A folded wing eagle, talons wrapped around a scoped reticle, 5 hash marks barely visible at the base of the design, the same emblem 6 people had carried into Kandahar, the same one he'd been told was never to be seen again. He had saluted them the day they deployed. He had written the report when they didn't return. His voice was low. "You're Spectre 6. Her head tilted slightly, but her eyes didn't leave his. She didn't flinch, didn't answer. He didn't need her to. She rolled her sleeve up fully. The tattoo wasn't new. It was worn. The lines softened by time and sun. She had not covered it, only let it fade naturally, like someone who had accepted her mission was no longer about recognition. "I thought you were gone," he said. She looked at him for a moment, then replied, "I never left." That was all. No explanation, no rank, no history, just a statement of fact. And in that moment, Ramsey understood. Spectre hadn't disappeared. It had adapted. Gone quiet. She had gone quiet. He stood at attention, not because she outranked him, not because protocol demanded it, but because it was the only thing that felt right. His salute was crisp, earned. It held for a beat longer than regulation. She didn't return it, just nodded. Once. A gesture, not of defiance, but of finality. The mission continued. He had no orders to give her, no authority to question her presence. Not anymore. He asked nothing else. Turned, walked back through the bay without a word. But when he reached the door, he hesitated. Not everyone made it back from that deployment, and those who did hadn't all come back whole. He turned his head slightly. "Are you still watching?" Ellie didn't smile. Her answer came without weight. Always. Then she bent again to her work, threading a copper connector into a stubborn joint as if they'd never spoken at all. Ramsey walked out into the morning air with the sound of distant rotor blades overhead. He didn't report what he'd seen. There was no official category for it, no clearance channel for what Spectre had become. He returned to his office, opened a drawer, and pulled out a sealed envelope with no sender. Inside was a photo from 2017, 6 shadows walking across gravel under a cargo ramp. One of them looked back. He folded the envelope and placed it next to his secure laptop. That afternoon, he told his aide not to touch it. When asked why, he simply said it was a reminder of who they owed, and of the ones who still watched without needing to be seen. Ellie Graves had once gone by another name. Though there were no official records left to prove it, she was the 6th member of Spectre 5, a reconnaissance sniper unit formed under Joint Special Operations Command during a classified escalation phase in Afghanistan. Their mission portfolio was narrow and lethal: long-range overwatch, exfil coordination, and threat elimination on the outer edges of known conflict zones. Ellie wasn't the best shot in the team. She was the quietest. The one who memorized building schematics before they deployed. The one who crawled 6 kilometers through ravines just to tap a comms relay the enemy hadn't noticed yet. In 2017, during Operation Hollowwatch, Spectre 5 was sent into Kandahar under blackout protocol. The op collapsed in under 12 hours. Air support was redirected. Extraction was delayed. Ellie made it out. The rest of her team did not. There was no debrief. No press release. Just a line in a file: assets, unrecoverable. The entire unit was listed KIA. Only a handful of names inside the Pentagon knew she'd survived. Fewer knew what came next. Rather than retire or reassign, Ellie was approached with a different offer, one that didn't come with rank, ceremony, or uniform. She would move through domestic installations under civilian status. Her job wouldn't be combat, it would be prevention. Observe, assess, intervene if necessary. She would be invisible by design. No badges, no clearance that raised questions, just coveralls and a wrench. From Fort Liberty to Pendleton Annex to Redstone, she rotated assignments every 9 to 12 months. Her listed duties remained identical: facilities technician, utility system support. In reality, she monitored pressure zones in maintenance corridors where sensor clusters could be breached. She ran diagnostics not just on valves, but on thermal signatures near air vents where rogue transmissions might hide. Her reports never carried a name, only a unit code, SV6. She watched personnel rosters, noted irregularities in shift patterns and equipment checkouts, a missing signature on a fuel manifest, a redirected tool shipment that passed through civilian delivery chains. Most of the time, her observations ended with nothing. That was the goal. Quiet meant safe. But on 3 documented occasions, she identified internal threats before they escalated. Once, it was a contractor with falsified clearance, trying to tap the fiber backbone inside a base comms room. Another time, it was a foreign national embedded through a third-party logistics vendor. The final one involved a compromised drone controller who had passed a weaponized firmware patch through a routine software update. Ellie found it while rewiring a breaker panel. None of it made the news. No base-wide alerts. No ribbons. But inside closed-door briefings, her mission logs were referred to as anomaly suppressions. She was a ghost, built to recognize the cracks that others missed, not through brute force or surveillance, through proximity. She was always close enough to hear what slipped between the lines. Every pipe she checked carried more than water. Every vent she cleaned framed the path to a potential blind spot. She didn't need access to classified files. She watched behavior. Behavior told you everything. An unsealed door. A shift in posture when someone thought they weren't being observed. The way radio chatter dipped when a specific name entered the building. Ellie logged it all without writing a word. Her weapon wasn't a rifle anymore. It was routine, predictability, the trust people gave to someone they thought didn't matter. She never broke that trust. She used it as cover. In Redstone, she spent 3 weeks analyzing the base's perimeter cameras while pretending to realign a misfiring thermal unit. She mapped access points along the comms tower scaffolding under the pretense of greasing the locking tracks. No one questioned her. She looked like someone who had been ignored all her life. That was the point. She didn't see herself as a soldier anymore. That version had died in Kandahar with the rest of her team. What remained was someone who didn't need a call sign to act. Ellie didn't hunt threats. She waited for them to cross her line of sight. Then she made sure they never got further. Her loyalty didn't come with flags or orders. It came with the quiet certainty that places worth defending didn't always need defense on the outside. Sometimes, the real danger came from within. And that's where she lived. Inside. Watching. Not because someone told her to, but because no one else could. It was a Monday. Cold, dry, and uneventful. At 05:00, the gates at Redstone opened like always. Guard shifts rotated. Fuel trucks pulled into the supply lanes. But Ellie Graves did not show up. Her workstation sat untouched. The breaker panel near the auxiliary pump still humming with the same low fault she'd been meaning to fix that week. By 06:15, someone radioed her ID tag to central admin. There was no response. That wasn't unusual. She often kept her radio off unless required. But by 07:30, her absence was officially logged. Maintenance lead. Officer Carter checked her locker first. It was open. The contents were gone. The shelves were wiped clean. The only thing left behind was a sheet of folded paper taped to the inside door. It wasn't typed. The handwriting was sharp. No flourishes. Block lettered, like someone used to field notes and mission tags. Threat neutralized. Mission complete. Someone else is watching now. S6. Carter turned it over twice before handing it to base security. No one said the name aloud. By noon, her file had been locked under priority level encryption. Her badge was marked inactive, with no reassignment orders. The system flagged her as civilian departure, with no notice required. Her tools were reissued. Her nameplate was unscrewed from the back office board. Nothing about her exit made a sound. But by the end of that week, something changed in the far corner of the equipment bay. A few base engineers took scrap from a dismounted comms panel and cut a small rectangular piece of brushed aluminum. They bolted it to the concrete wall just above the supply closet Ellie used most mornings. The engraving was simple, no dates, no insignia, just a few words stamped into the surface. To the silent watcher, Spectre 6. There was no ceremony, no official acknowledgement. That's not how people like her were remembered. But from then on, those who had worked near her started noticing the space differently. They walked quieter through the hallway. They looked twice at the power panel she used to maintain. A few left folded rags or unopened utility blades near her bench. No one ever touched the stool. Colonel Ramsey kept the note, folded it once, locked it in the same drawer where he kept a blacked-out operations report from 2017. Every so often, he read it again, not because he needed to, because he felt like he owed someone that. And, in the months that followed, whenever an alarm sounded or a relay failed, someone always glanced toward the maintenance corridor like they expected her to walk around the corner again. She never did. But sometimes, late at night, the perimeter lights near Sector 4 would flicker for no reason, just for a second, as if someone was still checking. Most people never think twice about the ones working in the background, the person sweeping the floor, the mechanic under the truck, the quiet figure checking wires in the back of the room while everyone else moves on with their day. It's easy to assume they're just part of the scenery. Easy to forget that sometimes the ones who say the least have seen the most. We live in a world where recognition often goes to the loudest voice or the highest rank. But every now and then, there's someone who serves without needing thanks. They don't ask for medals. They don't want the spotlight. They just show up, do what needs to be done, and disappear when the job is finished. People like that don't fit into most systems, but they keep those systems from falling apart. Ellie wasn't the story. She was a reminder that someone's title doesn't tell you their worth, that a uniform doesn't make a protector, that some people carry entire missions on their backs and never speak a word about it. They don't wear pride like a badge. They wear it like a tool belt, quiet, steady, always close when it counts. If you've ever looked past someone because of how they dress or what job they do, remember this: the world doesn't always need more heroes. Sometimes it needs more guardians, the kind who notice what others miss, the kind who fix things before they break, the kind who step in not to be seen, but to make sure others stay standing. So maybe next time you walk past someone who seems invisible, ask yourself what you're not seeing, because the person wiping down the bench or tightening the bolt might be the reason everything still works the next day. And if we're lucky, we never have to know just how much they've done. Some people protect what matters by standing in front of it. Others protect it by staying close and staying quiet. Both matter, both serve, and neither should be forgotten.